Hi, good morning all. Now today we'll see the k-means clustering method 2. Before starting with method 2, recall the previous video. In the previous video, we have seen the k-means clustering method 1. In that method, I would like to add this thing that suppose we having 3 points 2, 3, 4 and you select the cluster 1 as mean 2 and for the cluster 2 the mean as equal to 4. Then whenever you are clustering this 3 item, then since this 3 item is at equidistance from M1 also and M2 also, then you can cluster this 3 whenever you want. You can add this 3 in the cluster 1 or you can add this 3 in the cluster 2. Finally, you will get the same clusters. Okay. Now, we'll start with the method 2. Now, in the method 1, the individual data points are given, that is 2, 3, 4, 5 like this. Now, take this second example where a medicine database is given as there are 4 medicine A, B, C and D. And there are 2 attributes. One is the weight index for this attribute and second one is the pH level for this medicines. Now these are the data given. So whenever we are having the object which is represented using the different attributes, we have to use the second method for the k-means clustering. Now out of these 4 medicines, we can take any medicine as the cluster. Now in this problem, it is given that you have to cluster this 4 medicine into 2 groups. So the number of clusters will be 2. So now let's assume that out of 4 medicines, we take medicine A and medicine B as the first centroids. You can take any of the medicines. So now for A medicine, the attribute 1 is 1 and attribute 2 is 1. So my first centroid for medicine A is 1, 1 and the centroid for medicine B is 2, 1. So this is group 1 and this is group 2. Now we find the distance of each and every medicines with respect to the C1 and C2. Now how to find out the distance? For the medicine A, the attributes are 1, 1 and the C1 is 1, 1. So distance is calculated as this 1 minus this 1 square plus this 1 minus this 1 square. The square root of this is equal to 0. Now similarly for C2, this is 1 minus 2 square plus 1 minus 1 square root of that is equal to 1. So the distance of medicine A from C1 is 0 and the distance of medicine A from C2 is equal to 1. Now we'll calculate the distance of medicine B to C1 and C2. So B1 is 2, 1. So this 2 minus 1 square, then 1 minus 1 square root of that is equal to 1. Then 2 minus 2 square plus 1 minus 1 square, the square root of that is equal to 0. So the distance of B from C1 to C1 and C2 is 1, 0. Similarly, we find out the distance of C and distance of D. Now after calculating all distances, we form the object distance centroid matrix, or we can say this is an object centroid distance matrix. So this is D0 is equal to, now since this is a 0 iteration, this is D0. Now this distance is 0 and this is 1. So we write down here at 0, 1. So this is for group 1, this is for group 2. Now similarly, the medicine of B, 1, 0. So here we write down 1, 0. Then 3.61, 2.83, 5 and 4.24. So this first row represent the first group and the second row represent the second group. Now based on this distance matrix, we have to find out or we have to identify the object clusters. Now see this first column. This first column is for medicine A, this is for medicine B, this is for C and this is for D. So the distance of medicine A from cluster 1 is 0 and the distance of medicine A from cluster 2 is 1. So the minimum is this distance. So we can say that the medicine A is clustered in group number 1. Therefore, the first row is equal to 1 and the second row is 0. Similarly for B, the minimum is this. So we can say that the medicine B is grouped in second cluster. Now similarly, C, the minimum is 2.83. So we can say that the medicine C is clustered in the second cluster. Similarly, D is clustered in the second cluster. So after 0 iteration, these are the clusters. So in cluster number 1, there is only medicine A. In cluster number 2, there are B, C and D medicines. Okay. Now we go for the second iteration. Now for the second iteration, we have to update the centroids. Now to update the centroids here, in this matrix, you can see that in the first cluster, there is a single medicine A and the medicine A value is 1, 1. So your centroid 1 will remain same, 1, 1. But for the second row, we can say that cluster 2 contains B, C and D. So the cluster 2 centroid will get updated. So that is equal to 11 by 3, 8 by 3. Now how this is calculated? Now see here. The cluster 2 contains B, C and D. And the B, C, D are these values. So for the B, C, D, this is 2 plus 4 plus 5 divided by 3. Then comma 1 plus 3 plus 4 divided by 3. So this calculation is represented over here. So you will get this as the centroid. Now again you have to repeat the same process as that we have done in the iteration number 0. Again you have to calculate the distance of all the medicines, that is A, B, C and D with respect to this new clusters. So medicine A is 1, 1. So the distance of medicine A with respect to C1 is calculated as 1 minus 1 square plus 1 minus 1 square, the square root is equal to 0. And the distance of medicine A with respect to this newly updated centroid is calculated as 1 minus 11 by 3 square plus 1 minus 8 by 3 square, the whole square root is equal to 3.41. So in the same manner, we'll calculate the distance of B to C1 and C2, then C to C1 and C2 and D to C1 and C2. Then we form the object centroid distance as this. So the first row is first cluster, the second row is the second cluster. Now again we take the minimum of this. So you can see here that the minimum is 0. So you can say that the medicine A is clustered in the first cluster, the medicine B is clustered in the first cluster, medicine C is clustered in the second cluster, medicine D is clustered in the second cluster. So this represent my group number 1 and this represent my group number 2. So when you compare this G0 and G1, you can see that there is a movement of the object from one group to the another group. So we have to go for the second iteration. Now similarly again we have to update the centroids. Now since here the group number 1 contains 2 medicines, we have to update the centroid number 1 also and centroid number 2 also using the same concept. Then we have to calculate the distance of all medicines with respect to the newly updated C1 and C2, and this is your object distance matrix. Then again using the minimum method, you have to form the object clustering. So you can see here that the medicine A and medicine B are clustered in the cluster number 1. Medicine C and medicine D are clustered in cluster number 2. Here we can say that this G2 is same as that of G1. So there is no movement of the medicine or the objects from one cluster to the another cluster. And therefore, we can say this is the final cluster. So G2 is equal to G1. So stop here and your final answer is A and B. That is medicine A and medicine B is grouped in cluster number 1 with the centroid as 3 by 2, 1. And medicine C and medicine D is clustered in cluster number 2 with the cluster centroid as 9 by 2, 7 by 2. I hope this video will be helpful to you to understand the concept of k-means clustering. I'll cover the remaining topics in the next videos. Thank you guys.